What's your take on Jar Jar Binks?
Hey man, I like this character. Hello everyone, welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast. I'm here with my boy Daniel.
Hi.
Guys, we're just gonna get straight into it. Actually, before we even get into it, Daniel, do you want to introduce what today's discussion is about?
So this is the fourth episode in our series Have You Seen, in which one of us has seen a movie recently for the first time and the other is very familiar with it. We just finished the original trilogy of Star Wars. Now we're moving on to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So you just watched Star Wars Episode 1 for the first time. What's your take, and do you want to just briefly summarize what happened?
So pretty much, young Obi-Wan with his master, with his teacher,
Qui-Gon.
Qui-Gon, yeah. Well, pretty much, they had to like protect a princess, and then like there was two worlds, planets, I believe, that were in some sort of kerfuffle, beef, dispute when it comes to trade. And then there was a whole like setup where Obi-Wan and how do you pronounce the name? Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So then they get set up, and then now they're on the hunt. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon on the hunt by the Emperor in his younger days. So they're going back in time, and then they end up meeting baby Darth Vader.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Anakin.
It's Skywalker, yeah. And then they realize that this guy's got different type of force within him. I'll be honest with you, this was probably the best one so far.
Yeah.
I'm giving this one a strong, I wouldn't say 7, I would say 6.9. Of course there were some flaws, but I think overall this was definitely the best one. When it comes to the choreography and the fight scenes, it just looked more realistic. Love the fight scene between between Qui-Gon and what's the other what's his name? Darth
Maul.
Maul, yes. That guy he looked scary. Like, he, as a villain, aesthetic wise, he was definitely provided the heebie-jeebies. I'll be honest with you. His character was great. He just had that sinister feel about him. He didn't really say much. He just popped up with his lightsaber and did the business. So when he killed Obi's master, I was like, whoa. Firstly, when he killed him, when he was like the first character that made Qui-Gon, am I saying it right?
Qui-Gon.
I'm just gonna say Qui. He's the first one that made Qui sweat, because Qui had that character. He had that character about him where he was just very calm and he had a lot of faith in himself and in the Force. So it was like when he first encountered Darth Maul, it was like, whoa. He literally like made him uneasy, and he didn't even say much. You could just tell in his facial expressions, the way the way that he just ended up slowly transforming into now more like, we saw him in defense mode, if that makes sense, because he always seemed like in control, but now when he faced him, it was like he was starting to lose control in a way. So Darth Maul's introduction into this, Darth Maul definitely, he wasn't one of my favorites, but he was definitely a highlight in this film. But overall, like, everything about this film was amazing. Even like diving more into the Star Wars universe, especially, of course. Well, now I think this film was made when, in 1999.
98, 99.
Exactly. So of course, like, the technology is better, so the aesthetic is going to be better. But still, diving more into the universe, it just looked crazy. Especially like the underwater. I don't know what the actual universe I don't know what the underwater scene, underwater planet. I don't know what's that called. What is that called?
Well, the planet is Naboo, and the underwater civilization are the Gungans.
Yeah, that looked amazing. But just diving more into the Star Wars universe just looked amazing. I was like, oh crap, like, this looks really good. I can see where other movies got their inspiration from. Like, obviously 4 with the underwater place, and then I remember I mentioned Dragon Ball with the when they were in the sky. So yeah.
So one thing a lot of people bounce off of or bring up when the topic of episode 1 comes up is, in the opening crawl, it talks about there's a trade dispute and it's a trade federation, and a lot of people go, wait, what, am I watching a Star Wars movie? Well, why are we talking about tariffs and trade disputes? What was your first reaction to that?
I thought that was a good take. I didn't have an issue with that. I'm actually surprised that people brought that up as an issue. I think it kind of adds realism you know what I'm saying, to the whole Star Wars universe. You know what I'm saying? It's something that we
Yeah.
can relate to, because obviously now in today's society, people do beef over, countries do beef over trade. So it's like, I understand, like it kind of, like, the war that they're fighting is like, the reason isn't a rubbish reason, is a reason that we can actually relate to. So it's like, okay, I understand the extent of, if you don't come to agreement when it comes to trading, what countries will do to, just get their terms met. So it's like, yeah, I understood that. Actually, I enjoyed the whole trading dispute. So yeah, I'm surprised. They said, so wait, so what about Star Wars besides lightsabers do people like about?
Well, I mean, like when you go to the original trilogy, it's a lot focused on the Empire versus the Rebellion, and you've got smugglers and you've got bounty hunters, and it's all very adventure focused, right? And now a movie comes along and says the big conflict in this is tariffs, and a lot of people basically just say, well, that sounds lame. That doesn't look that interesting. And my personal opinion is that the movie just doesn't do a very good job explaining what the Trade Federation actually wants. Right?
Okay.
So okay, there's a trade dispute and they're invading Naboo, and somehow that's legal or doesn't immediately bring the entire Republic down on them. Clearly, they have been promised something, right? Like they're clearly being manipulated by the Emperor, right? Or who the Emperor is going to become. But it's not clear to me what they were promised, other than profits. But why does occupying Naboo accomplish that? I think that is something the movie could have done a lot better, and I think it could have been done. But I think people kind of have a point in that's one of the weak points, because it doesn't explain what the stakes are exactly.
But I think I wouldn't say self-explanatory, but like, we know the importance of trading, right? And we know that the kind of like disruption it can bring to when it comes to world peace. Like, obviously, if like things are not pretty much met in terms of like terms and conditions or amongst countries, that could literally like potentially start a war. So,
but I mean, there's usually some specific demand, like access to a market or lower tariffs or something, right? Or cheap access to resources or something. Like there's like throughout history, there's a bunch of different ways this can go. Like wars have been fought over access to markets, for instance, or getting access to some important port or whatever. But none of that seems to be, like, none of that is mentioned. I think if they had just said Naboo sits on the most important trade route, and if we control that, we control all trade into the galactic core or whatever. Like, I think that would have been enough. But even that is missing from the movie.
I was gonna say, does it have to, like, does something specific have to be named? But now that you say that, it kind of does make sense why, it wasn't really fleshed out, right? Because it's like what they actually in dispute over. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem with. I actually quite like the opening sequence, where I think that's kind of the only time we really see, or at least so far, that we really see Jedi just doing their thing, right, in a way that is not fighting the bad guys. Right, we kind of get our first glimpse at what the Jedi are like at the height of their power.
And it actually made me realize as well how much sacrifice you need to do to become a Jedi. Like, especially the scene, I think what kind of solidified that for me was Anakin leaving his mom at such a young age. Like, whoa. Of course, like, throughout we see, we see how kind of like the Jedi are treated like some sort of like superheroes, right? But it's like, I don't think we've kind of like seen pretty much how much they need to sacrifice. I don't think that's really been highlighted in the movies, but this one, I think that kind of solidified it. It's like, okay, yeah, even though they are treated like kings, it comes with a price. And obviously for Anakin, it was his mom. So I was like, damn.
Yeah, so speaking of the Jedi, like in the original trilogy, we didn't really see the Jedi as an institution, right? There were two survivors, and they were trying to keep the code alive and the ethos, but we didn't see the institution. And here we do a little bit, right? Not a lot, but we see the council, for instance, and we see Qui-Gon be a teacher to Obi-Wan, and the two have disagreements about how to implement the Jedi code and stuff like that. Yeah. What was your takeaway on that?
I think it was mainly from Yoda's character, like what Yoda was saying about Anakin. I think that's what I kind of like took away as the highlight from seeing their council, because he was like, oh damn, like Yoda could already see the darkness in, not darkness but fear in Anakin. So it was like, when you look back in the movie, it's like, now I understand why he was so reluctant when it came to Luke leaving or even training Luke in the beginning, because it kind of all falls in place now. And it's like how Dark, how Yoda was right all along about Anakin, even though he was young. It's like, why the hell was Yoda doing that? But then you remember, like, oh, this little kid becomes Darth Vader. So it gets you kind of like more interesting. For me, it gets it more interesting. I'm like, I want to see now episode 2, because Yoda was right all along. Even the Master vouched for Anakin, and it cost him his life. And it's like, damn, he literally, he was the vehicle. He was literally the potential like downfall or the destruction of their planet or their world, or just the worlds in general, because obviously Darth Vader ends up doing the madness. So yeah, in terms of the council, there wasn't really anything besides Yoda's foreshadowing of Anakin, which stood out to me. But it just seemed like a normal council that gives commands and instructions.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, right? Where they are both experienced Jedi. Like even Obi-Wan has been doing this for years, but they have different ideas of how they should be, how they should act, and what the right way to be a Jedi is, right? But we see them discussing like the rules and what to do in specific situations.
Well, I had a question. What was the midichlorians? They said that's how Anakin was.
So the midichlorians are another thing that's controversial, and if you ask people to name like the top 5 things that ruined Star Wars, they usually mention the midichlorians. It's up there with Ewoks and a couple of other things. Essentially, they do explain it in the movie, but it's kind of fast. So essentially, the midichlorians are these microscopic organisms that live in all living things, and they kind of mediate between the Force and people. So the more midichlorians you have, the stronger your connection with the Force is. So it's basically a way of quantify. Like they can do a test for. So in the original trilogy, people kind of had a more mystical understanding of the Force, right? They had visions, they had premonitions, and they would look at somebody and say, "Oh, this person is strong in the Force," or "I sense their presence," or whatever. And now we go into one generation earlier, and they can do a lab test. They can tell you in a number how strong you are in the Force. What's your take on that?
A bit confusing, because the mom obviously when
Qui-Gon.
I'm never gonna get his name right. But Qui-Gon, I'm gonna call him Gun. Actually, that's easier. Gun.
Oh, well, you won't in the future. He's already dead. So
yeah. But when you asked, obviously, Anakin's mom who the dad was, he was saying he doesn't have a dad. So that's why I was a bit confused. Obviously, down the line, ends up saying obviously he was kind of produced by midichlorians. I'm like, wait, so
yeah. One of the less subtle Jesus metaphors in fiction.
Yeah, so that means he actually doesn't have a dad.
Right.
But I'm still confused.
So does it make the Force more or less interesting if we're talking about microscopic organisms and blood tests and stuff like that, or is it more interesting if it's a religion?
I don't think. Personally, for me, I don't have an issue with neither of them. It didn't have any effect on me on how I was, my experience while watching it. I was just confused, honestly. Now, obviously, that you explained it, it's like I still don't fully understand, but yeah, it doesn't really have an effect in terms of like the whole. Because when she first said that, he doesn't have a father, I was like, oh, okay, he is the chosen one. Cool. I was like, that makes it kind of cool as well. But then now that you're saying there's some sort of scientific, reasoning behind, obviously, Anakin's conception is like cool.
Well, it's not just his conception, but that the midichlorians are the reason why he's strong in the Force, and the lab test says he is the strongest Jedi alive, or has the potential to be the strongest Jedi, simply because the midichlorian number is higher than Yoda's or anybody else's. So in the originals, it's all very mystical. It's all very intuitive.
But the chosen, I did like the whole chosen one concept, because when he doesn't have a father, I was like, oh, okay. And already we saw glimpses of Anakin's greatness already, so I was like, this kind of makes it a bit more fun, the chosen one. I always like the whole golden child concept when it comes to movies, but in terms of like it being science, like having the whole science element and the whole religion element, I don't have an issue with it. But did people have an issue with it? Did you have
a lot of people do.
Oh wow! What the hell is good?
Mostly because it changes how the Force is presented, right? It goes from very very internal, very mystical, very spiritual to there's an objective number to describe the Force. And a lot of people don't like it. Personally, my personal take is I like it because it says a lot about the Jedi in this time period. Because it makes sense that the Force has, like, people have a very intuitive understanding of the Force, right? It's something they feel. It's like it has to do with their experience. And so it makes sense that it's kind of gets started as a religion or as a spiritual practice. And it also makes sense that as the generations go on and the Jedi exist for hundreds and thousands of years at the center of power, and they are this institution with all the resources, it kind of makes sense that their understanding of the Force becomes more systematic. And then when the institution is destroyed, the understanding of the Force becomes more mystical again. So in the Imperial era, it makes sense that the surviving Jedi don't have access to midichlorian tests, and they don't have access to all this knowledge and the records, but their interaction with the Force is scaled back to their personal subjective experience. And that's where it becomes more mystical. So I actually really like that. It's also not a huge part of the story, right? I think it creates some plot holes. Like, it does mean that you can just test everybody in the galaxy for whether or not they have the Force. And there should be no such thing as a hiding Jedi, or, like why does it creates questions like, why does the Empire not run midichlorian blood tests at every starport, for example, to find the Jedi? Like, they don't do that in all the different stories. Like, there's a whole bunch of different stories about Jedi being hunted down by the Empire during the Imperial era, for instance, and the midichlorians never come up. In large part because those stories were written before the midichlorians were created. But like, it does create, I think, some plot holes, but not in this movie, I don't think. And I think it's a nice way of showing that the Jedi are not the same in this era compared to how we knew them in, after being in exile for a generation.
Yeah. And but I feel like that's kind of like a rubbish reason to. Everyone has their personal preference, but the whole notion that because this was like a mystical Force that now obviously is kind of ruined because it can be measured. It's like, nah, that's not that. Like, who says that number can't grow? Like, even like in Dragon Ball, right? Only certain, only the special ones was Super Saiyan, right? Like, what was, a specific civilization, right? I forgot what they were called, but only they were, could become a Super Saiyan. Only a few of them could become a Super Saiyan, right? But it was still energy that could be measured down the line, which we ended up finding out. So it was like, no one had an issue with that as well. So I don't know why they have such a big issue with, this can pretty much be, it's just systematic. I don't know why the whole systematic element is something which they do not like. It is ruining for them. I don't get that.
It does change the tone and feel of the story, right? It changes something from something mystical to something scientific. And I understand having an issue with that. I just don't think it ruins. Like, I think there's more upsides to it than downsides.
But it could still be mystical, though, because imagine if they're measuring a number that goes above 20,000, and then there's a scene where it's like, how the hell is this possible? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that could still add, that could even amplify it. It still adds to even more. It could even add to the mystery, because I imagine if someone goes above 20,000, it's like, whoa, who the hell is this? Who the hell is this guy? Do you know what I'm saying? That adds more to the mystery. So.
Yeah, I agree that it doesn't ruin it, but I can kind of see how it feels like it's being changed for no good reason, right? Like plot-wise, they could have, like, Qui-Gon could have just looked at Anakin and felt how strong in the Force he was, right? Like from a the reason the midichlorians are introduced in this is to give them a reason to take Anakin with them, right? But they could have just said, I've never felt somebody so strong in the Force. Let's take him with us, and then show him to the council, right? So from a plot standpoint, I think it's really redundant. But yeah, like, it's like, for me it's not a huge deal, but a lot of people will cite it as something that was not a good idea.
Well, question: how do you feel about Darth Maul?
Just in general, or
just in general? Do you feel like he got killed off sooner? Do you think they should have developed his character even more? Or?
So I think he serves his purpose in this story.
Okay.
Right, he shows that, like, we get a glimpse at a different dark side user, right? And he is different from Vader, and he's different from the Emperor. And so that was like, at the time, that was the third evil Force user we had seen. And yeah, the double-bladed lightsaber is a gimmick, but it's fine, right? It's a nice addition to the world. And I think he's not supposed to have a whole lot of character, right? He's just supposed to be. It's supposed to show like he's the product of. He's kind of a proto Vader, right? Because he is a product of the Emperor and he's a tool of the Emperor, just at an earlier time. And so we kind of see what that looks like and what kind of person would serve him and so on. So on that basis, I really like him, and I think he serves his purpose, and he's part of the duel with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan in that reactor. I think is one of the great scenes that's really that is really iconic and really stands out in this movie, I think.
100%. Yeah, man, that scene was definitely the highlight. I'm just a bit confused. I'm just like, even when I saw the IMDb rating for this film, I was like, whoa, like what the hell is going on? Even though like I don't really take, that's a lie. Any film under 5 when it comes to IMDb ratings, I'm a bit skeptical of. But films above 5, I don't really care. Like, so IMDb ratings don't really affect me that much, but they are a bit of a guideline in terms of type of films that you're going. But when I saw that the IMDb rating for this film was like 6 points, I think it was 6.6. I think it was out. So out of the ones that I watched, I think it was the lowest. So I was like, whoa, like, damn, I'm surprised. I was surprised, and like hearing like the reaction, the universal reaction when it comes to this film, it's a bit surprising. I don't really see like. I'm just confused how. So for them, it was. Would you say that it was the plot holes in this film, which is why people didn't really like? Obviously, we've mentioned the elements of why people didn't like it, but would you say reason why this is ranked? I'm guessing this is ranked amongst, is ranked one of the lowest amongst the whole series franchise.
I don't know what all the other reasons are, other rankings are. For me, it's somewhere in the middle. I think it has some serious problems, but it's also not among the worst. Actually, the next movie, Attack of the Clones, is more, I think, for me, the second worst Star Wars movie. And we can talk next week about why that is and whether you had the same experience. I think this movie, first of all, I think it's part of the prequel era, and so a lot of people, I think, first of all, I think they are quite poor movies in terms of how they're made. I think the story is really good, but you have to try really hard to get to the story because it doesn't tell it very well. I think that's kind of the bottom line. And I think this movie makes a couple of really important mistakes. So, for example, making Anakin a young child, I think, is a bad move, because it basically means he can't do very much, and we have to basically tell Anakin's story in 2 movies, not 3. Right, because like we can see where he comes from, but we didn't really have to see all of that, right? We didn't have to see the circumstances under which he grew up. We didn't have to see the pod race, even though I like that scene. But we did, like, for the story, it's not all that important. Or for Anakin, like for the movie, it's important, but for Anakin's story, it's not really. So maybe you will have a different outlook on this once we've done all 3 movies in the prequels.
I was gonna say, do you think that those was important, because those scenes kind of show like glimpses of his greatness? And
I mean it's not nothing, right? But you basically, like, he becomes a Padawan at the end of this movie, and then his entire journey as a Jedi starts in the next movie, right? So and basically one of the complaints is that gets quite rushed. So, and I think that was really unnecessary. Like if I could redo the prequels, I would start it at a point where he's an older teenager, and maybe he's like a freighter pilot, or he's a smuggler, or someone who is using his Force talents to survive, but isn't a Jedi, and then he's discovered maybe or something. But he's more of a complete person at this point. Whereas here it feels a bit like a prologue. Another thing that a lot of people dislike is the amount of slapstick in this. So, for instance, the entire droid army is just a joke. What was your reaction to them?
Wait. What did the droid army look like?
The robot army, the army of the
okay.
Trade Federation.
Okay.
So we see a lot of
For
them.
me, they provided the whole comedic aspect to it, which I enjoyed for that reason.
But is it a good idea to have your villains also be a joke?
Yeah, that was it. They did for me. They represented. Like I said, they brought in the comedy, which I actually really liked. In terms of the whole threat, in terms of like if they were also supposed to provide the whole fear factor element of these are some serious guys, then no, they didn't really provide that for me. But in terms of like the whole, like I said, in terms of like comedy and the whole comedic value, they definitely did their job. Like for me, those were like one of the funny encounters, especially the encounter where they told I think it was it Obi-Wan? Oh, so Obi-Wan and his master when they were with the princess, and then I think they told him to stop. I forgot the line that the robot said, but you know which I'm talking about, where they told him to stop, and then he was saying something like, "Oh wait," or something like that. I forgot, but then that scene was hilarious for me. But
sure, but so that's subjective, right? It's not my favorite kind of comedy, but it also kind of diffuses any threat that comes from them, right? They're already cannon fodder, right? And I think it kind of like that the Trade Federation has a droid army, right? They don't have an army full of soldiers; they have an army that is manufactured and purchased, right? And so I think that is a good piece of characterization, and it kind of makes sense that like individually each droid is really weak and kind of pathetic, but there's millions and millions of them. There will always be more, right? So I think like also remember that this is the first time that a new antagonist came up in Star Wars, right? Up until this point, it was all the Empire all the time, and now we have a new enemy, and they're jokes.
Okay, I will agree with that because they didn't provide no threat whatsoever. Like I said, for me, also they provided the comedy. But now that because I was actually gonna say, was that the intention? Because I didn't know like Star Wars was known. Well, it was the whole incorporation of comedy, was that intentional or?
Well, I mean, they put those jokes there on purpose, right? But I think in the original trilogy, the jokes were kind of on the sides for the most part, right? It was like C-3PO fussing around, or like aliens doing weird things in the background. For the most part, it wasn't part of the main, like it was never center stage, right? The Ewoks are controversial precisely because they bring the comedy into the main story, but like the general tone of the original trilogy I think can be described as kind of pretty serious melodrama and space opera in the center, and then there's comedy in the margins. And here we put the comedy right at the center. And it's not just the droid army; it's also the Gungans. What did you think of them? Jar Jar Binks. What's your take on Jar Jar Binks?
Hey man, I liked his character. He didn't really provide the issues for me. It was a bit hard understanding him sometimes, but I'm just so confused. You didn't like his character as well? I'm just really confused. Why? So would you say people not liking obviously the robots and the Gungans, whatever they're called, the Jar Jars or Gungans?
Yeah, the people are the Gungans and Jar Jar is the character.
People didn't like Gungans as well.
So here's the thing. They are also a joke, right? They talk in funny accents. And they kind of the prequels are kind of full of really old-timey racist caricatures, right? Like the Gungans talk with like black accents from like the I don't know what era, like mid 1800s, right? Like they're fresh off the plantation.
There was certain accents in house thinking, wait, what's going on?
The Trade Federation talks with like stereotypical Chinese accents. Like the shifty merchant types have Chinese accents. Like come on, right? It kind of falls like it's all like I think individually none of this ruins this, but you have the droid army, which is a joke, and then you have the Gungans, which are this weird caricature, and then you got Jar Jar that's really central to the plot, who was constantly just tumbling stumbling around and tripping over his own feet and being a general idiot. But I think he's much worse than C-3PO in the sense that his antics are much more central, and he also contributes very little. Right, with C-3PO, that's more more of a detail, and he also contributes useful things. So the jokes don't overstay their welcome as much. With Jar Jar, it's all nuisance all the time. And then you've got the Gungans, and then you've got the droid army. Like it's all a bit too much.
Okay, yeah, okay. So I see where you're coming from in terms of like, there's no, it kind of went overboard with something which, like you said, was pretty much on the sides. You know what I'm saying? Rather, it shouldn't have been the core. So I do understand. I'm not confused at why I'm taking it different from other people. Like even like for me, like when it comes to, I'm really big when it comes to serious tone films, and if it was to transition into, like, let's say for example, one of my favorite franchises, let's say for example, Dune, right, transitioned into some sort of comedy action, like like Marvel, what they did before. So let's say for example, if that happened with Dune, I probably would have been pissed. But I don't know why, for some reason, I didn't necessarily have an issue with the slight transition of having from starting off with such a very serious tone and having some comedic parts to it, until now is like, okay, you can feel there's a very heavy tone of comedy. I don't know why. For me, it just worked. I do agree that the threat wasn't as strong from, the freaking robot army, but I think that threat for me was, I was satisfied with Darth Maul. That's why I'm probably not as, as worried about the robots. For me personally, I didn't even know the robots were like the main threat. I thought it was mainly Darth Maul.
Sure. Yeah, you can see it that way. Yeah. Like they are the enemy army, right? Like the stormtroopers were kind of a joke, but they weren't funny. Yeah, right? Yeah. They were not a threat really, but they weren't like tripping over their own helmets.
Yeah.
Right? Like they were not a joke.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's actually a fan edit of this movie that just takes out all the jokes, and it's a much better movie. Like the Gungans talk a lot less. And the droids specifically don't talk at all, and it makes them kind of this faceless, sinister army that has no humanity at all, and it makes them very menacing. Like even though they look the same, but the fact that they're not talking makes them a whole lot more menacing, and it's got a completely different vibe to it. Like ultimately, there's a taste issue, and I think it's also a little bit different because this is not a war story, right? Like this is kind of the prelude. Like we can see that pieces are being moved into position, right? And that people are being manipulated, and that the Emperor is kind of moving in the shadows, right? But the conflict has not really started yet. Whether that's a good idea to spend an entire movie on that is a different story, but maybe that's why the comedy is not as jarring as it would have been in Empire Strikes Back or something.
I hear what you're saying. Well, yeah, I'm just interested to see the next film, to see what actually happens. Like you said, it's the start of Anakin's Jedi journey, so yeah.
Yeah, so next episode is episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So based on what you saw in this movie and that title, what's your expectations and predictions?
Expectations, I think the Master's presence isn't going to be heavy. He's going to be lingering. Like he's going to be, while, Anakin's training. Going to be definitely lingering around Darth Maul's God. So yeah, I definitely feel like his presence is going to be felt rather than seen, especially when it comes to Anakin's upbringing. So yeah, I think that's what I think is going to happen in this film. So obviously it's going to revolve around Anakin and his training, and we're going to see glimpses of the fear which Yoda was so scared about within Anakin. And then so I think it's going to center around Obi, Anakin, Yoda, and the Master.
And what about the clones?
The clones, I don't know what that could be.
It's called Attack of the Clones, right? So they have to be clones and they have to attack.
Oh,
right.
I didn't think it was going to be that literal, but okay, cool.
Well, I mean, I'm just prompting you, right? Basically, if you hear the title and you know what's already happened in the first movie, well, what do you picture? And because remember in the very first movie in episode 4, we heard about the Clone Wars, right? We heard about how Obi-Wan and Anakin fought in the Clone Wars together. So, and now the next movie is called Attack of the Clones. So what do you make of that?
The Clone War. Guessing that's what they're gonna show us. I don't know what the Clone War. I don't know who the enemy, as in who the enemy is, but we're got to see the Clone War or their preparation for the Clone War, or how it even started, came about. But yeah.
All right, well, I guess we'll know next week.
Yeah, cool. All right, guys. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's discussion. Let us know what you think down below, and yeah, like, comment, share, and subscribe. We will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Bye bye.